Oh, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Cropper here. We got some Lefty philosophy. We're going to go through a little bit. Ayn Rand, Rational Actions, and Game Theory. My Introduction to Objectivism by Lefty Philosophy. Do a little playback speed enhancement here. He has come on my videos. He found my critique of objectivism, and he says he'll stream a long reply soon, and he'll do a short reply of some kind soon. I said, oh, my birthday present's coming early. It would be my dream of dreams to have some of these people reply to me, right? Because then, well, I don't know, then it'll just be over, and I have to be on another victim. No, what happened in that Victor Prost debate, huh? Who's going to step up to the plate if that's the record that Mr. Cropper has? So, should I be more careful so I don't scare people off? No. All right.
Beginning of my video series about Ayn Rand. Her most interesting contribution is her philosophy of objectivism. It is a system of belief.
Ayn Rand's most interesting contribution is her philosophy of objectivism. Then there were other contributions. What were those?
Cannot change. It's basically the answer to what people object to about moral relativism. My understanding of objectivism is the reason why I do not particularly care for modern-day libertarians and American conservatives. This framework of ideas has contributed greatly to those ideologies. Because I don't believe many of its central tenets don't hold any water, then many of the right's ideologies have no appeal to me. Objectivism's central tenets are that reality exists independently of consciousness.
That doesn't hold any water for him. That reality exists independently of consciousness. Holds no water for him. Amazing, right there, huh?
That human beings have direct contact with reality through sense perception.
Holds no water for him. Humans have no contact with reality through sense perception. We are cut off from the non-reality. Our senses cut us off, actually, from non-reality. He thinks he understands what's actually out there, and he thinks he understands how our senses work enough to know that they're faulty, right? He knows they're faulty, and he knows that whatever the real reality is out there, we don't have access to. Well, that's quite a bit of knowledge right there, sir. Quite a lot of knowledge, if I say so myself.
That one can attain objective knowledge from perception through the process of...
How did you obtain this objective knowledge, if not through the process of perception and then whatever you think comes after that? What was your process? You just deduced it logically by being consistent? Something like that?
Concept formation and inductive logic. That the proper moral purpose of one's life is the pursuit of one's own happiness. Or
that holds no water for him. The proper pursuit of your life is the pursuit of your happiness. Holds no water for him. Aristotle is the one you're going to have to talk to for that, buddy. Read Aristotle's Nicomachean Ethics and dispute and refute. Okay? You don't even have to do it line by line. Just choose... Do my videos. Do a reply to my videos on Aristotle's Ethics, because his ethics does have a bit of fluff in it, and I took some of the fluff out. And so what I think is substantive about his ethics is in my videos. Reply to that. That's how you're going to be able to refute the idea that happiness is the end of all action. Of course happiness is the end of all action. You wouldn't want to produce a society that pays workers well or whatever unless you wanted those workers to be able to spend their money on a nice house and some popcorn at the movies and make themselves happy. So happiness is the end of what you're after as well, sir.
Self-interest. That the only social system consistent with this morality is one that displays full respect for individual rights embodied in laissez-faire capitalism, and that the role of art in human life is to transform humans' metaphysical ideas by selective reproduction of reality into a physical form, a work of art that one can comprehend and to which one can respond to emotionally. Before I begin to discuss any of my ideas about Rand and objectivism, I have to define something called rational self-interest. Many people will automatically view this as inherently bad because selfishness in society is frowned upon. The way I have come to understand what rational actions are is through the studies of a mathematical model called game theory. Understanding this is imperative to understanding why being a rational actor isn't always considered a bad thing. At the end of the day, we all want what is best for ourselves. Please bear with me. Game theory is incredibly complex, and I'm going to introduce its concepts. I hope that it sparks your interest.
Now, we're being introduced to game theory here by somebody who's not a master of his own mind.
And curiosity to explore further beyond I will. So what is game theory? Game theory is the study of mathematical models of conflict and cooperation between intelligent, rational decision makers. Game theory is mainly used in economics, political science, and psychology, as well as in logic and computer science. Originally, it addressed zero-sum games in which one person's gains will result in losses for the other participants. Today, game theory applies to a wide range of behavioral relations, and is now an umbrella term for the science of logical decision-making in humans, animals, and computers. So why is game theory so important? Game theory helps to explain why rational individuals would choose to cooperate with each other. This piggybacks off the rational choice theory, in which it assumes that all people try to actively maximize their advantage in any situation, and therefore are consistently trying to minimize their losses. The theory is based on the idea that all humans base their decisions on rational calculations, act with rationality when choosing, and aim to increase either pleasure or profit for themselves. When we speak about...
Now, if so far as it's based on those, it's wrong. Humans act on whim, right? I mean, they can actually act against their own rational self-interest. They often do act in self-destructive ways. They say things that are going to... they do things that are going to... They plan things that are going to lead to disaster, right? They make purchases that... any rational analysis of the situation would show that they can't afford. Later on they have to sell a vehicle or a house or get a second job or whatever. People do these things all the time. So, the people, it occurs to me just now that the people who are getting their panties in a bunch, that humans aren't rational. Humans aren't rational. You're pushing an open door here. We know that. We're trying to get humans to be more rational. Man is the rational animal. Means that he has no other way to survive. And insofar as he does survive, he's rational. That's all it means. It doesn't mean that he's always rational, and everything he does is always rational, and rationality is defined by what he does. That's none of that. That's all garbage. So, insofar as game theory is based on those assumptions, that would be ridiculous. And I don't know that it is. I really doubt his ability to understand it. I mean, I know of game theory, and I can theorize in game theoretical situations and stuff, but I don't know math. I don't know math very well. I don't... anything above, algebra is outside my ken. And so I don't know, is game theory even mathematical? I don't know, but it certainly is a thing of mathematical geeky people thing, right? That's a thing it is, right? But insofar as it's based on the notion that all humans are rational, that's obscenely bizarre. We want humans to be rational. Insofar as they survive, they are rational. Being rational is the only way to survive. That does not mean that all humans are rational, or that rationality is that humans do. Neither of those follow.
Rational in this way, you must also keep in mind that this theory does not take into account of an afterlife. If you only had one life to live, then rationally speaking, you would take any action that would give you the best possible outcome every time. To say that this is inherently selfish is kind of missing the point to what a rational individual would want. They would want to always strive for what is in their best interest because they only have one life. Sacrificing your...
Right. Rational people are selfish people. Yeah. He glimpses something there, doesn't he? He sees something going on there, doesn't he? But he's looking at the world through a straw, and he quickly loses sight of what he's seeing.
Save another is irrational because you would cease to exist, and in the end, if rational decision-making is built upon the idea of the best possible outcome for that individual, death would always be irrational. Now, the prisoner...
Death would always be irrational. Well, let me just tell you that reality is what it is, and we accept reality. Now, if death is part of reality, then that's not irrational, that's just part of reality. And we live our rational lives before we die. We don't live our entire life every time we make a rational decision, right? We make a rational decision after rational decision after rational decision after rational decision, and we die a long, long, long time after that. So viewing death as a refutation of rationality is just about the dumbest thing I've heard since I woke up this morning. Just about.
Dilemma is the most basic mathematical formulation for game theory. It is a two-person, one-shot prisoner dilemma game. This means two people are forced to interact with each other, in which cooperation and defection are the only two possible actions that one could take. It is a one-shot scenario because this game is only played once between two individuals. The classical dilemma involves two criminals. Before they were arrested, they jointly committed a crime that carried a high penalty with it, like robbing a bank. They both agreed to never rat each other out. Now, they've both been arrested for another minor crime, destruction of personal property. This new crime has nothing to do with the previous major crime. However, the police have a suspicion that these two people committed both crimes. They have absolutely no evidence connecting either one to the previous major crime. They know if they can get a confession, then it doesn't matter. Either way, the criminals have to be charged with the crime. Now, in order for the scenario to be considered a PD game or a prisoner dilemma game, it must follow the equation that temptation is greater than reward is greater than punishment, which is greater than the sucker's pill. Temptation is the greatest possible payout. Reward being multiple or mutual cooperation between the players. Punishment is mutual defection, in which both players choose not to cooperate with each other. And sucker's pill is the worst possible payout that one can get. In the classic PD game described above, defection is the dominant strategy. This means that there is no reason to cooperate, since it leads towards the worst possible payout every time. If they choose to defect, rational choice, then they avoid the worst possible payout every time.
What was their rational
If both prisoners
choice?
choose to defect, con.
I didn't see the rational. What's
And sucker's pill is the
okay? So these are two convicts or criminals, and we're talking about how they can be the most rational. All right. Well, the context matters, you know. Maybe you could come up with a better example of rationality. Maybe somebody could. Somebody would be able to come up with an example of somebody being rational in the real world. Two criminals and how they commit crimes and how they get out of being punished is not exactly tackling the issue of how our mind relates to reality. No. Maybe some little facsimile of some corner of some issue. But, all right, bad try. Not even nice try, bad try. What is this?
PD game
Garbage.
Above, defection is the dominant strategy.
You're proving that if people are scumbags and they're lying to each other and the police are after them, the best thing to do is duck and run rather than stand with your partner or something like that. I mean, whatever. That's an approximation of the type of analysis you're making here, right? What does that have to do with rationality in man's mind and his independent mind? What is this? What is this? You could have a better example than that? This is Ayn Rand is in the first sentence of the title here, and he comes up to try to talk about rationality. He comes up with two prisoners who have broken the law, and now they're trying to rat each other out or something.
There is no reason to cooperate, since it leads towards the worst possible payout every time. If they choose to defect, rational choice, then they avoid the worst possible payout every time.
Oh, so they would go against what's rational. Since they have started out by being irrational and breaking laws, and now the police are after them, their best option now is to continue to be irrational and be more irrational. That's flimsy, Lefty. It's the best you can do, I know. It's the best you can do, I know.
Both prisoners choose to defect, then they will both get 5 years. This payout is much more preferable than the possibility of receiving 10 years if one chooses to cooperate and the other doesn't. Defection is the dominant strategy because it would never lead to the worst possible payout.
Would you rather get 5 years or have a coin toss and get 0 to 10? And you would either get 0 or you'd get 10. So I'm going to say to you right now, you're going away for 5 years. Or you're going away for 0 to 10. Coin toss. Which one do you choose? Now, how does rationality apply to that? And what are you going to learn by analyzing this floating abstract nonsense that's not related to any real rational choices that anybody would have in reality. What are you proving here? That rational is the irrational? That the irrational is the rational? According to your floating definitions and your floating abstract nonsense that's not connected to reality about prisoners who are already scumbags trying to get out of being punished more, you are going to... what? What are you doing?
10 years. Because the worst possible payout is 10 years, there is no reason for one to unilaterally change their position and not to defect. This is what is called the Nash Equilibrium. But this is not the best payout for all players. In the chart above, if you look at it, one player will either get 0 or 10 years, and the other player will get either 0 or 10 years. Or they could either get 5 years. But if we wanted to take into account all players in the game, if they both cooperated, then they would only get 1 year apiece. So the best payout would be to deny all allegations and serve the 1 year jail sentence for the minor crime, thus never admitting to the major crime. And
the best payout for who? What if one of them gets out with 0? Was it still the best payout for that guy that got out with 0 to go back and do a year? Best payout for who? See? You set up this bizarre, stupid scenario where these people have been dishonest, they've trapped themselves in a corner, and now you're analyzing the situation. And you are learning exactly 0 about rationality and human action, and you are displaying your ability to think.
Getting a better
or
payout
inability.
than punishment, which is 5 years. Only in this case can the best payout be achieved for all players. Each individual's best payout is to hope that the other player confesses and they deny. Then the individual will walk away as a free man. The criminals are also kept in separate rooms in which they cannot hear the other, nor can they communicate. Some believe that communication would change the way the game is played between two players, but this relies heavily on trust. If one has the option of not serving any time at all, a rational person would lie in order to gain the best possible outcome for themselves. Take a look at this clip about the game show called Golden Balls.
This is serious, life-changing money. Your jackpot today is $100,150.
Alright, I just want to hear the claim he made. Again, what claim?
The best possible outcome for themselves. Take a look at this clip about the game show called Golden Balls between two players, but this relies heavily on trust. If one has the option of not serving any time at all, a rational person would lie in order to gain the best possible outcome for themselves. Take a look at this clip about the game.
See, if you have the possibility of serving 0 time, a rational person would lie. But we're talking about liars already. So you already dropped the context of what rational people would do. Is lying a rational thing? No. So unless it is, right? Unless it is. So if you're setting up people who are dishonest in the sense that they've stolen, they've broken the law, as your base group to consider, that's weak. That's weak. That's not going to help you learn about rationality. What do irrational scumbags do when they're trying to escape punishment? They act irrationally.
Called Golden Balls.
This is serious, life-changing money. Your jackpot today is $100,150. You have one final decision to make. Easy decision. We're now going to play split or steal. I know you're the last 2 people in the country I have to explain this to, but you have 2 final golden balls. You each have a golden ball with the word split written inside. You each have a golden ball with the word steal written inside. You will make a conscious choice of choosing the split or the steal ball. If you both choose the split ball, you split today's jackpot of £100,150 and you go home with £50,075. If one of you splits and one of you steals, whoever chooses the steal ball will go home with £100,150. And the person who chooses the split ball goes home with nothing. If you both choose the steal ball, you go home with nothing. Okay.
So the split is considered...
Alright, so don't choose the steal ball. Just split it. Both of you just agree to split it, right? A rational thing is to choose to split. Now, how much are we going to learn from somebody building a board game and setting 2 people down and seeing how they figure out what to do? How much are we going to learn from that? Now, could we learn anything analyzing the way that agriculture is done, or the way that metal manufacturing is done, right? Like, what if game theory were applied to some actual something that was applicable to reality? I don't know how applicable game theory is to reality. Hopefully it's applicable at some point. Is it just floating nonsense? Can an objectivist give some opinion, please, in the comments? Is there anything worthwhile in it, or is it all made up nonsense, like a floating game? Is it just games that when we really look at them, it's like, but where does that apply? How are you going to apply this? And even if it shows you some principle, like what principle does it show you that you should... What principle do we get from this that we can apply to reality? That you should... that under certain extreme strictures you should always cooperate, or what? What do we learn from this? I'm struggling because it's so disconnected from reality. It's just an abstract thing. What is the principle? That we should cooperate more? Oh, is the principle just that rational... Oh, is this all just... Is game theory proving that rational action's impossible or something like that? Or that rational action isn't what we define it as? Is it equivocation to defeat rationality? I wonder.
And stealing is considered defecting. In order for this to be a prisoner dilemma game, it has to follow the equation that temptation is greater than reward, which is greater than punishment, which is greater than the sucker's pill. Or, in this case, $100,150 is greater than $50,075, which is greater than 0, which is greater than negative $50,075.
Where's the negative? Where was the option that they were going to lose money or get it taken away? Oh, well, he probably equivocates that somewhere. Maybe. Were they going to take money away? They lose the money they already had or something?
Where did I get the negative $50,000 from?
Yeah.
That's what happens when somebody decides to split and the other player decides to steal. They steal $50,000 from the other player. So it's a negative payout.
So if I'm sitting here with 0 and that person takes off with $50,000 that I might have gotten, I now have lost $50,000 and I'm now have 0 again. Wait.
Now, before I continue with this video clip, I want to point something out. Write down what you think will be the outcome. Who will split or who will steal? Or will they both split or will they both steal? One major objection to the prisoner dilemma game is that if the players are able to communicate with each other, that changes the outcome. Both players would rationally pick to receive the reward, which is mutual cooperation. Or in other words, both players would receive at least $50,000. Let's see this in action.
Before I ask you to choose, I want you to look at your 2 golden balls and make sure you know which is the split ball and which is the steal ball. This is very important. Make sure you don't show each other. Before I ask you to choose, I think you have some talking to do to each other.
Stephen, I just hope they weren't puppy dog tears and they were real tears and you were genuinely going to split that.
I am going to split this. 50,000. I'm just going to...
So you talk the other person into splitting. You say, okay, we'll split. And then one of them does steal and takes it. Right?
Everyone who knew me would just be disgusted.
Now, where does this apply? Like, what steel plant, what wage negotiation, what contract to lease a home for 50 years? Where does this apply to reality? You know, just give me an example where we can apply this. Okay, maybe we can apply it. I just can't think how or where.
Does that change your initial guess at the outcome? Do you think it changed each player's decision? Do you understand how trust and mutual cooperation in this game is playing out? Let's see if you can still guess the right outcome.
Hold it up. We're going on with 50 grand each. I promise you that.
They both put steel, right?
Split or steal? You never know what's coming in this game.
She just did the cold thing.
Sarah, you have just
right?
won 100.
Because she knew for sure that he was going to choose split. He was promising it. She read him and she said he is going to do split. Now, Am I going to take 50 or 100,000? She faced a different choice, didn't she? He faced a choice of try to get her to split it. She faced the choice of take 50 or 100. She faced a different choice than him, right?
My God, do you see that bitch's face? So, did you guess it correctly? More than likely not, because you used some emotions in your decision making. You were not thinking as a rational individual. See, the rational individual...
This has no application to rationality at all. At all. I made up a board game that's very exciting.
would always want to avoid the worst possible payout, which would be the negative $50,150.
What does it prove if it proves rationality? The rationality is difficult, that we don't know how to practice it. You make up a board game and you say the rational thing is... What is the rational thing? To try to figure... Is the rational thing to try to get the most money? Is that the rational thing here? To try to win the board game? Now that is defining rationality a certain way within very, very limited strictures. That's dropping the definition of rationality, isn't it? Especially if you're talking about Ayn Rand. I mean, game theory, fine. You want to talk about game theory? You're talking about mathematical floaty-doty. And if it could be concretized and applied, okay. I don't know that, but if I had to go off of this nonsense, I would say no. Game theory's out. It's nonsense. It's whatever this is here. I don't know about game theory. I shouldn't talk to game theory, should I? Whatever's going on here is nonsense. This is not related to rationality. This is not related to a rational man's seeking his own happiness in his life and decision making. This is a board game. What can we learn from this?
Possible payout, which is the $100,150. What decision would you have to make in order to avoid the worst possible outcome? You would have to choose steal every time because...
Now, why? Was that the decision that man made? Did he choose steal? No. He did not. He did not have confidence of what that woman was going to do. He was not sure what she was going to do. So he tried to talk her into splitting it. Make sure we split this. Let's not be stupid. Let's both get money here. Come on. She did not face the same decision. She believed him. She was in a different state, and her decision was 50 or 100,000, not 0 or 50 or 100 or what can happen. She had a very limited set of choices. She would have looked stupid taking 50,000, so she took 100, and she looked cold or brutal or whatever, right? This is not teaching us anything about rationality or how to run a steel factory or a railroad. This is not teaching us anything.
Being split may lead to the worst possible outcome. This is why understanding what being rational is maybe hard for many. They want to believe that the other people will have their best interest in mind as well. That or their own morality would prevent them from doing something bad to another person. They wouldn't be able to live with the guilt of taking all the money. For some,
this is the depth of his understanding of rationality, is people sitting around at a board game. You can't analyze something deeper. Or lefty philosophy, if you can, then please do.
That would be easy since the guilt was worth $100,000 in the case above. While I do not think Ayn Rand knew about game theory, including it here will hopefully explain why one of her central tenets really isn't really selfishness per se, but that the proper moral purpose of one's life is the pursuit of one's own happiness or rational self-interest. If you really want to understand objectivism, you must understand what Ayn Rand is placing at its core.
Now
its
what?
Rational self-interest.
Did he just...
This is what she measures every pursuit of one's to live with the guilt of taking all the money. For some people, that would be easy since the guilt was worth $100,000 in the case above.
All right.
While I do not think Ayn Rand knew about game theory, including it here will hopefully explain why one of her central tenets really isn't really selfishness per se, but that the proper moral purpose of one's life is the pursuit of one's own...
One of her central tenets isn't selfishness per se? Now what's he saying? Is he refuting something here?
But that the proper moral purpose of one's life is the pursuit of one's own happiness or rational self-interest. If you really want to understand objectivism, you must understand what Ayn Rand is placing at its core, its rational self-interest. This is what she measures every response off of. It's objective because morality is based upon what is morally true, which will always point towards the best possible outcome for the individual. It's not subjective in her mind because the endpoint is basically survival of that individual.
So he's disproven that there's a reasonable, rational way to look at things because these game theory things are a mess? Is that how he disproves that Ayn Rand's rational theory of self-interest is a mess? Is that what he did there?
Something bad to another person. They wouldn't be able to live with the guilt of taking all the money. For some people, that would be easy since the guilt was worth $100,000.
So you're analyzing guilt in a game. The feeling of guilt in a game. It's not okay. My advice is read some of Ayn Rand's works and just take some of the examples that she works with and try to use those to think about. Because this stuff isn't related to reality at all.
While I do not think Ayn Rand knew about game theory, including it here will hopefully explain why one of her central tenets...
Okay, so he's included game theory here in order to explain something about one of her central tenets. Okay?
Really isn't really selfishness per...
One of her central tenets isn't really selfishness per se. So she doesn't defend selfishness. One of her central tenets isn't selfishness per se. So he's clarifying or renaming Ayn Rand's concept of selfishness as something else. Is that what he's doing here?
But that the proper moral purpose of one's life is the pursuit of one's own happiness.
So it's not selfishness. It's the proper pursuit of one's life is one's own happiness. Not selfishness. Well, Ayn Rand defines selfishness as the proper pursuit of one's own happiness. So he's trying to... What are you trying to put the audience at rest here? Ayn Rand didn't actually advocate selfishness. She advocated personal happiness and rationality.
Rational self-interest. If you really want to understand objectivism, you must understand what Ayn Rand is placing at its core. It's rational self-interest.
Is that what's at the core of objectivism? Is rational self-interest? No. It's existence and the fact that you have a mind. If you exist and you have a mind, then you have to survive by using your mind. And that means you have to place your value, your existence, your daily day-to-life existence as your primary goal. So that's how we start. We don't start by saying we should be rationally selfish. Who should be rationally selfish? The individual that exists in reality. Well, you never mentioned that. You just jumped right to rational selfishness.
Measures every response off of. It's objective because morality is based upon what is morally true, which will always point towards the best possible outcome for the individual.
Yeah, see, now that's just word salad confusion. Whatever just happened there, I'm not even going to analyze it. That's just word salad confusion. He's just saying things like that.
It's not subjective in her mind because the endpoint is basically survival of that individual. And if the individual is dead, then the most irrational thing for an individual, that would be the most irrational thing for an individual.
It would be irrational for him to die. Not in every case. Sometimes you'd want to die because you know you're on your way to a torture chamber or something. That's very rare. It doesn't happen every day. But there are some individuals for whom continuing to live is irrational. Or if you have some terrible cancer, you know you're going to be dead in a few weeks or whatever, and you're suffering beyond all get out, and you're either in a drug-induced haze or you're suffering terribly. And in that case, maybe you do just want to die. Maybe you want to die because you don't want your family to go on suffering, or the expenses are insane and you're just laying there in a drug-induced haze. So every time you come out of it, You say, am I still alive? Why am I still alive? Please get me off these machines and stop spending money keeping me alive. So, no, staying alive is not always the rational goal of every rational person. No, that's equivocation. You're equivocating the fact that an individual should value their own life, and that should be the goal and purpose of their action. You're equivocating that to happiness being always maintaining your life, which is just junk, dude. It's junk. Okay, that's fine. If that's the best you can do, that's the best you can do.
Peterson has very similar ideas when asked about truth.
Sounds like what you're saying is that truth is as much about action as it is about some sort of material, measurable objective.
He would choose Peterson, who is such a ninny on truth, right? Do you remember how Peterson defined or was trying to define truth with Sam Harris in that disaster podcast where it all went off the rails and they just argued about truth for 45 minutes? Do you remember that? And after that I said, oh, Jordan Peterson, I like some of the stuff he says, but what a ninny on truth. And so he would choose Jordan Peterson, wouldn't he? To illustrate a point about Ayn Rand. That's just how stupid this guy is.
Reality.
No, I'm saying it's more about action.
More about...
Oh, yes. The fundamentals of truth are those that guide action. And then the objective science is nested inside that. It has to be.
Right.
There's no way around that. There's only one way.
I'm not going to unpack what Peterson says there, but he's fundamentally not addressing the subject. But I'll do Peterson some other
truth
time.
In relationship to finite beings.
There's only one way you can define truth in relationship to finite beings. What does finite beings have to do with it, Peterson? Why do you put the word finite there? There's only one way to define truth in relationship to beings. What does finite beings add? See, there's Jordan Peterson.
True enough for what? True enough so that you survive and reproduce.
True enough so that you survive and reproduce. Well, in what sense is it only partially true then? If it's true, is it true or not? Like I need to sleep with that woman over there to get her pregnant so that my genes go on. Well, is it true or not? Like, what do you mean by true enough? Like it's true to a certain extent, but beyond. Like, see, that's just viewing truth as some bizarre platonic floating form that the truths in our life partake partly in, but not wholly, or something like that. It's just nonsense. Jordan Peterson. It's just nonsense. Sorry. And to bring him up, and his view of truth up, during a discussion about Ayn Rand, is pathetically below the bar, sir.
That's it. You don't get to go any farther. What's more true than that? Sorry. Can't ask that question. That's it. You've hit the limit.
Hopefully, I've provided a basic understanding of this concept.
No, but you've given us a pretty good understanding that you don't have any grasp of what's going on here. I just sat through that whole freaking thing waiting for you to say something about Ayn Rand. You equivocated about game theory a bunch, brought Jordan Peterson in to discuss truth, and now you're done. Whew. All right, ladies and gentlemen, if you support what I do, please Patreonize me.